Yeah.
But I would love to be a part of those conversations and tell them what it's really like as someone that relies on.
What's it really, really like? Tell me what it's like, what it's really, really like.
Well, you know, because they talk to the managers.
Yeah, yeah.
And
Talk to
which is
who?
great. I don't know. I mean, but they're not talking to us.
You knew this affects producers.
Good morning, everyone. Today we gather in a moment of reflection and in a moment of responsibility. I'm Shane Harris, the public advocate, San Diego, and I'm here to reflect on the passing of Reverend Jesse Jackson, the Reverend Jesse L. Jackson, who was a freedom fighter, a presidential candidate, a bridge builder, and a man whose voice echoed throughout our streets, pulpits across the country, the halls of Congress, and the conscience of America. Let me begin by just underscoring why this is personal for me. This is not just a national loss, but this is somebody that I had the profound honor of knowing over a decade, not just as a historic figure, but as a partner in the work of defending and protecting civil rights and social justice. Many of you know that I got my start in activism with many of the national civil rights leaders that you see, including Martin Luther King III, Reverend Jesse L. Jackson, Reverend Al Sharpton, who I had the chance to work alongside. I grew nationally and was able to organize on a national level with national civil rights organizations and through nonprofits in which I was able to take on a tremendous amount of organizing national marches, which was tremendously difficult. Standing up on a number of injustices, including the shootings of Stephon Clark in Sacramento, where I took that on, headlining that issue with the family of Stephon Clark, as well as traveling across the country for a number of other civil rights injustices, including the killing of George Floyd, where I traveled in 2020 to Minneapolis, Minnesota, to stand with the family of George Floyd and to support them in their quest for justice. So this is, for me, very personal. As a partner in the work for civil rights and social justice in America, as an ordained Baptist minister myself, I got my roots starting with the African American Baptist Church, where I started preaching when I was 16 and grew to become ordained through the National Baptist Convention at the age of 21. At that time, Mayor Kevin Faulconer was the mayor, and I was ordained at 21, established a church at 21, and was deemed at one point the youngest pastor in San Diego. Someone who I really looked up to and spent a lot of time with as I grew in my civil rights work was Reverend Jesse Jackson. In 2016, following the first election of President Trump, when uncertainty and fear ripped across the country, I marched with Reverend Jackson in Washington, D.C. during one of the largest national civil rights marches and mobilizations in modern history as a referendum on President Trump as he was sworn in as the President of the United States to ensure that we defended civil rights, and protected the future of civil rights in America. The streets were filled with people demanding justice, inclusion, and accountability. And there was Reverend Jackson as I was marching next to this historic civil rights leader. Reverend Jackson leans over to me and he talks with me on multiple occasions about the longevity of the fight for civil rights, that this is not a short run, but this is a longevity fight and cause. And he would often tap me and let me know that you will not be thanked for the work that you do. And in some cases, you may have to wait until you are gone to be appreciated for that work. He was steady, resolute, consistently, reminding us that progress is not guaranteed, it is fought for. He taught us that hope is not passive. Hope is organized. Hope is disciplined. Hope marches on. I stood with Reverend Jackson in San Francisco just a few years ago when we came together to fight for civil rights and criminal justice reform, and specifically take on the recall effort against District Attorney Chesa Boudin, who was the District Attorney of San Francisco at that time. And that moment was about more than one individual, Chesa. It was about whether communities committed to progressive justice would stand firm when challenged. Reverend Jackson and I showed up, as we always did, and specifically as he always did, when the stakes were high. And even then, he was struggling in early illness. And he conveyed to me, Reverend Harris, stay in the fight, don't give up. God has got your back. That advice was consistent for him every time we spent time together. And I will never forget walking the halls of Congress in Washington, D.C., with him and his son, watching lawmakers pause when he entered a room, seeing staffers lean in to hear his words. He carried moral authority across this country and in the halls of Congress, even in the White House. He understood power, more importantly. He understood how to challenge it. From his work with Dr. Martin Luther King to founding Operation Push and later the Rainbow Push Coalition, Reverend Jackson reshaped civic landscape in this country. He expanded political participation. He built multiracial, multi-faith coalitions. He pushed corporations to hire inclusively. He fought for economic justice, educational access long before those conversations were widely embraced. He believed deeply in lifting from the bottom so that the whole nation could rise, as he often stated during his presidential run in '88. And that belief is why I stand here today. Reverend Jackson, during his '88 presidential campaign, brought together multitudes of coalitions, became one of the most prominent African Americans to ever run for office in America, and specifically the presidency, and became very close to securing the Democratic nomination for president. The reason why we have a Barack Obama is because we had a Reverend Jesse Jackson first. The life and legacy that Reverend Jackson lived has created multitudes of progress. Whether it was him standing with Dolores Huerta, who I also have had the chance to work closely with, and fighting the fight for farm workers, or whether it was him standing for victims of police brutality, or taking on corporate responsibility and inclusivity within corporations and holding those corporations accountable. Jesse Jackson is an echo of freedom, a voice of reason, and a strategic leader of challenge and change. I remember Reverend Jackson often telling me, as I spent a lot of time with him over the years, as you can imagine, whether we were at marches or whether we were in the halls of Congress, he would always talk to me about being strategic, not just throwing something out, not just responding, but having a solution to present. I think that is the echo of his leadership and what he did during his time as a civil rights leader. He was strategic in his response. He would often strategize about solutions and seek to present those solutions before he talked about a problem. And I think that for me is the core of why he means so much to me, and historically why he has been such a tremendous figure in my life. Because he always reminded me that longevity has to bring solutions forward. Longevity has to be about something more than demonstration. It's got to be about legislation. And that is why today I have crafted my entire civil rights history and career around not just talking about problems, but presenting ideas and solutions. Not just talking about an injustice, but talking about the justice that I would like to see. And I think that is why we must honor Reverend Jesse Jackson here in the county of San Diego. Now, in honor of Reverend Jackson's life and legacy, my Office of the Public Advocate has formally requested that the county of San Diego lower its flags to half-staff in recognition of this monumental contribution of the civil rights leader of this century. In contingent with that, I've notified all county supervisors, including Ebony Shelton, our county CAO. I have already heard back from 2 supervisors who have received the request. Supervisor Joel Anderson and Supervisor Jim Desmond have both responded and said that they will work to support my request for the lowering of the flags at half-mast in honor of Reverend Jesse Jackson Sr. In contingent with that, I've also formally requested that the county administration building be illuminated in rainbow colors in tribute to the Rainbow Push Coalition, a symbol of unity, inclusion, and belief that when everyone is included, everybody wins. The Rainbow Push Coalition, founded in 1996 by Reverend Jackson, has been a long-standing civil rights organization that embodied what he built in his presidential campaign, bringing together all races, all backgrounds, to fight for justice, equality, and opportunity for everyone. I remember Dr. King's words very vividly, which is why I will always reach out to all communities and make the attempt to build bridges where I can, because Dr. King often talked about how it's not about the content of your character. It's not about the color of your skin, but the content of your character. That is what our country's principles were founded on. That is what the Constitution is supposed to embody. And I believe that if we could take just a piece of Reverend Jackson's legacy and history and push forward in that level of inclusion and opportunity for all, then we won't argue anymore about who gets a piece of the pie or who gets the better piece of the pie. We will then argue about everyone having a piece, everyone sitting at the table, and everyone being included. Finally, one of the things that I really appreciate about Reverend Jackson's legacy, and something that he always talked with me about personally, is that you've got to be logical, reasonable, and rational. You've got to talk to people that even disagree with you. I think one of the things that you look at with today's civil rights movement versus the civil rights movement of yesterday, in the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, is that these leaders understood that they will go talk to a Republican, a Democrat, an independent, didn't matter who it was, to take on the issues they cared about. And Reverend Jackson would always tell me, if you care about an issue enough, you will work to try to find a coalition wherever you can. And you will talk to whoever will listen. Reverend Jackson wasn't just a civil rights leader who went into, even though he ran as a Democrat in 1986, he didn't just go talk to Democrats. He went to talk to Republican presidents. He went to talk to people who were on the other side of him, his ideology. And I think that that is what I will continue to push forward. A civil rights movement that is not built on violence or rhetoric, but that is built on strategy and coalition building, that is built on talking to all people, even people who may, from an ideological standpoint, disagree with you. Reverend Jackson taught us that the rainbow was not just branding, it was philosophy. It was a coalition. It was a declaration that America works best when we stand together across race, class, faith, and background. Reverend Jackson's life reminds us that democracy requires participation, justice requires courage, and progress requires persistence. He often told us to keep hope alive. But those words were not sentimental. They were strategic. They meant organize. They meant mobilize. They meant vote. They meant show up, especially when it's hard. Today, as a longtime civil rights activist myself, and as a ordained Baptist minister through the African American Baptist Church, where, needless to say, I got my ability to speak in the pulpit, just as Reverend Jackson did. I mourn the loss of a mentor and a friend, someone who I had the chance to work with for over a decade. But I recommit myself to the work that he dedicated to his life, to expanding opportunity, defending civil rights, and building coalitions that move our communities forward, talking to everyone, even if they may disagree with me. San Diego County should stand on the right side of history. Just weeks ago, Tara Lawson Raymer, the Board of Supervisors chair, lowered flags for people in Minnesota, and rightfully so. Well, today we have lost a historic civil rights icon who brought this nation together in incredible ways and leaves a legacy that is of the likeness of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. The MLK of our century has passed, and therefore we should honor Reverend Jackson with this historic lowering of the flags and the lighting of our county building in rainbow colors to honor the dedicated life that he made to making sure that the doors of democracy were open wider than he found them. The least we can do is honor that commitment and keep hope alive. And we must continue the work going forward. I'll take any questions at this time.
An early memory of seeing Reverend Jackson on TV or something that inspired you?
So the earliest memory was 2 years ago. We were in Washington, D.C., and I was with him and his son. And he was in a wheelchair at the time because his illness was progressing. And I'll never forget, even as he could barely talk at that time, he uttered these like a statement. I believe it was Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez who came up to us because he was there and she wanted to talk to him, Congresswoman Cortez, and he said, he like uttered like this like sentence of something. I couldn't make out fully what he said, but he said, "You guys," like he pointed to me and AOC, and he said, "You guys are the future." And you know, and it was kind of like he was like saying like, "Don't honor me, you know, I'm old, like I'm already in my fourth quarter." But he was like trying to like say like, "You guys take it now," and I remember I was like, "I ain't taking nothing. This is you, you know, like I'm just, you know, navigating my way." But that was like the most recent time, was 2 years ago. We were in Washington, D.C., and I was there for some things, and he was there for some things, and we just started walking the halls of Congress together, and I just wanted to soak up everything I could because I knew that the time was coming. I didn't know when, but I knew the time was coming, so.
That was the last time you saw him.
Yeah.
Do you know, we have video of him from the 80s being here in San Diego.
hmm
Do you know of any more recent visits he made to San Diego?
No, we were talking with his team actually about bringing him here. I was in consistent talks with his team because I was concerned about timing, where he was in his at this point, and so following the DC, trip, I was making attempts to try to bring him here, but the illness was progressing so quickly, and so they were starting to kind of keep him in Chicago, and didn't want him traveling as much, and that just grew like very quickly. That this illness progresses very quickly, and so we were in talks, but I don't know I think the last time he was here was for that. He also came here for the National Black Contractors Association gala sometime in the early 2000s. This was years ago. This had to have been about 20 years ago. So.
Are you planning to go to Chicago? I know that's where the services are.
I am, because sometimes you go to these services, and I'm not a funeral guy. I don't like funerals. I think this is a celebration of life, but it's also a celebration of an icon who ran for president, who wasn't perfect, and he talked about that too. Nobody is. I think that's the beauty of his life, is that he didn't live in this like self-justification style of ego in his work. I think he was very vulnerable with his mistakes, and so because I spent so much time with him and learned a lot from him, I feel like it's important for me to be in Chicago for this service.
If you could take one thing from him as you continue to pursue your activism,
Mhm.
what would that be?
I would say it's what I've done, Shannon. You know, I started out on the fight for Black people. I'm still in that fight. I still believe in that fight. I started out on the fight for police accountability. But I think when you start to see things worldwide and you start to, see things from a broader standpoint, you start to realize that injustice lives everywhere. Um, it's not just African Americans. It's not just one party that you speak to, one political party. Um, the essence of his effectiveness was that he talked to everyone. And I think that some of my African American colleagues don't like that I do go around town and work with a number of coalitions across the city, whether I'm standing with, um, folks in Mission Hills who are trying to protect their historic preservation sites, or whether I'm standing, in Balboa Park fighting for people, many low-income people who cannot access a public park now that it's costly to go there, which is an economic injustice issue, or whether I'm standing, continuously in the fight for, ensuring that our officers uphold stronger accountability measures, and particularly are sensitive to people who feel historically, African Americans who historically have been concerned. I think that the goal is to always talk to everyone. And, I'm a Democrat. I've been a Democrat since I was 18 years old. I never switched parties. But one thing I have done, and I've gotten a lot of flack for it, is on the issues, foster care account, working to reform the foster care system at the county level, nationally, even statewide, is I've engaged with Republicans. I've engaged with the other side of the aisle on those issues, And I think that Reverend Jackson did that very well. He went to talk to Republican presidents and Democratic presidents. And I think that's missing in today's society. People don't talk to each other. Now there's so much energy put into combativeness, taking on, people just on the basis of their political party or the color of their skin. And I think that we have to do better at engaging with people and trying to understand where they're coming from, even if we disagree with them. So I think that's the core of what I would take. Strategy, you cannot have a strategic movement for change with violence. I still believe in the nonviolent civil rights movement, and that is what Reverend Jackson believed in, and that is what Dr. Martin Luther King believed in, and that is what I will continue to push. Remember months ago when there was marches going on, No Kings protests, the first one, following some of these egregious immigration actions. They're egregious, no doubt. But we cannot respond. We cannot fight fire with fire. We can't respond with violence. We historically, these civil rights icons believed that you make more progress when you stand on the principles of nonviolence and you fight that fight all the way. That it's more of a longevity fight, and I think that that's the essence of what I take from him and what I'll continue to progress in my movement going forward. All right. Thank you.
So much.
Thank you, guys.
Appreciate your time.
Yep.